And welcome. I am so grateful that you guys are here today. We have a really special guest joining us today, and it's someone who has poured out encouragement, creativity, and faith through years of homeschooling and healing and writing. We have Robin Sampson. She is a homeschooling mama of 9, a Bible journaling mentor, and the heart behind studies like Discovering Inner Peace and From Ashes to Beauty. If you've been journeying with us through the Inner Peace study, you already know how rich and life-giving her insights are. And today we get to sit with her and hear parts of her story and ask the deeper questions so many of us mamas carry about peace and trust, motherhood and healing, and just walking with Abba in real and raw and beautiful ways. So, welcome, Robin.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So, you have actually homeschooled 9 children, right? What has helped your family stay grounded and centered in faith through it all?
Okay, that's 2 questions. The first one is I didn't actually homeschool 9 at one
Oh,
time.
okay.
I wanted to clarify that because most people have this image of 9 children. But I started with 4 children, school-age children and a toddler, so 5 children. And
That's so
that was
cool.
it was that like that for a long time. And then we had a few more children. And then the main part of it, over the 30-year period, I was homeschooling 7 at once.
Right.
And then in my 40s, at 44 and 46, I had 2 more babies.
Oh,
I
wow.
started all over again, and that's why I've homeschooled for 30 years. It didn't take 30 years for them to graduate. It just was a cycle. And what kept us grounding? It took me years to get here. I just don't want people to assume I started off great and just did great because I had a lot of failures. And when I started with 4 children and a toddler, I tried to do way too much. And I was always frustrated and always irritated. And I was being asked to speak a lot at homeschooling, at churches, because homeschooling was brand new. This was 1986, I think. And because it was so new, I was asked to speak a lot. And when I went to speak, I kept getting the same questions over and over. How do you do it? Why do you do it? Is it hard? How do I know I'm doing enough? How do I know I'm doing enough was the number one question. So what I did is I started jotting down things, and I ended up writing a book, my first book called What Your Child Needs to Know When. And in it was a checklist for every grade K through 8. And it became a huge, there was a few homeschooling books back there, and this became a bestseller. And it irritated me. It bothered me. It was a nagging thing that why is everybody so worried about what the state wants and nobody's asking, what does God want?
Oh, good point.
Yeah. So I rewrote the book. I added 200 pages. And while I was doing it, because I'd already been homeschooling for several years, I recognized I was skipping Bible. I was skipping Bible because we had too much in algebra, we had too much in English. And so I was worried about them knowing pronouns, which is a whole nother subject today. But I was worried about them knowing pronouns instead of knowing who Joshua was, things like that. So I re-examined myself and I started putting Bible first so that we wouldn't skip it. And even if it was 5 minutes, I tried to do, sometimes we did an hour, but at least a minimum of 5 minutes to 30 minutes because I needed the prayer. I
Absolutely.
needed to open up to God to see what He wanted me to do. So that's my biggest grounding. When I started doing that and started being still and listening to Him, He started guiding me. And that's the big news is you are walking in union with the creator of the universe.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
you're not doing this by yourself.
What an encouraging thing to share with us. Thank you.
Hmm.
What advice would you offer to mamas who are constantly being felt like they feel behind or not enough?
Yeah, that's real common. That's what we all feel. I just wrote my autobiography. It's called Discovering Beauty from Ashes, and it's a Bible study, but it's based on my story and what when I was born and my childhood, and then homeschooling, and then the homeschooling business. So throughout this, what I discovered was I had a cycle. A cycle real similar to if you've ever studied the book of Judges, it was the same cycle. And what I did was I tried to do it on my own, just like the judges tried to do it on their own. And then guess what the second step in the cycle is? Failure.
Yep.
And then you invite God in for
Right.
the step three, and then it starts working. You repent and give yourself to Him. And that's when you get the answers. So my answer to every question that you could possibly ask about homeschooling is surrendering myself to God and then allowing Him to lead me because my path might be different from somebody else's. They might be teaching one child, they might be in a whole different direction. Most of my children didn't go to college, several of them did, but the one, you might be teaching someone who needs to go to college, who needs to become a doctor. Somebody else might be teaching somebody to be a homeschool mom. So it's a you have to surrender and ask for directions for His path for you.
So you're saying that we need to really just align our ideas, our priorities
Yes,
with
yes.
Yahweh's word. Okay.
And the way you do that, how do you know you're aligning them if you're not reading it?
Hmm.
And that was another huge step, just homeschooling.
Mhm.
Well, let me tell you how I started homeschooling real quick because I think that's relevant. When we face trials, we get irritated, mad, angry, anxious, and worry.
Yes.
And God tells us not to do that, and we do it anyway. My trial was I had my children in a private Christian school, and
Mhm.
it wasn't doing its job. It was not educating my children, and they were a lot of worldly things were going on. And I was frustrated and irritated and mad and angry and anxious. Well, guess what? I ended up homeschooling. And that homeschooling grew into a business of 6 bookstores and an international catalog. And it just grew and grew and grew. And it basically supported my family for 30 years. And it's still going today. My oldest daughter runs a Christian school on what I started. So, what started as a trial ended up being this something I would have never imagined.
Okay.
And God used it to give testimony to thousands of people.
Amazing.
I asked my husband a couple nights ago, I said, when I look back on all these trials, every single time I see God did something good. Romans 8:28, He uses all things for good to
Yes.
those who love Him. And I said, why did I had a trial the day before? I said, why am I so upset?
Hmm.
I know that He's going to use this for good. Why do I get so upset? And he said, well, maybe you're a slow learner.
Oh no. Well, aren't we all sometimes?
We forget. And that's why we have the Bible and we have the Bible stories. Those stories were given to us to see all the people who also were worried and in trials and over and over and over and over. And when we can, and then God can bring them to your mind if you plant them inside. But if you don't plant them, you don't really see them.
That's excellent. Thank you. What so what do you think would be some key anchors that helped you reset on those hard days when you were in the midst of the trials?
I just wrote a letter called Anchor, and
Oh,
it's anchored in hope. That's what the Bible calls it, anchored in hope. And Christ is our hope.
yeah.
He's our truth. And it always goes back to that. What I'm doing is the most important job, in my opinion, that you can do is mothering children. And then on top of it, homeschooling children, which is Deuteronomy 6, what we're supposed to do anyway. Teach them by the way as you go all day. And God constantly gives nudges of, you're drying the dishes and your kid asks you a question. Those are the real teaching times. And another thing about that is more, this is profound. So listen to this.
Yes.
More is caught than taught.
Hmm.
You can sit at the table or the little desk, whatever you have set up, and read out of books all day long. But if you're not showing trust in God, if you're showing anxiety and worry, that's what they're going to learn.
Hmm.
And I learned that the hard way too.
Set the example first for your children to follow.
Absolutely. And you have some quiet time before you even start homeschooling. And when you start homeschooling, start in the Word. And when you make that your priority, they're going to catch that. Charles Stanley had a whole sermon on, you can look it up on YouTube on a Mother's Day sermon, Charles Stanley. And he saw his mother on her knees when he woke up. Yeah, that's profound. And here he was like in his 70s remembering that.
That's amazing. What a
Yeah.
great example.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Would you say that that was what you incorporated as your rhythm for the day, just to so you wouldn't feel burned out or overwhelmed, that you were constantly just wake up and put yourself in the word then?
Well, we definitely had overwhelming days. We definitely had crazy, messy days. We definitely didn't get the laundry done and, things like that. I was really blessed to be able to teach my children entrepreneurship by having them. I started by going to churches to speak on homeschooling.
Right.
And we went to publishers and said, can we buy these books at discount if we buy a bunch of them? And
Mm.
my children sold the books in the back. So there was a lot of, every one of my children, I have eight now, one passed away, but she was probably the most entrepreneurial, but the other eight are also entrepreneurial because of what they learned
Mm.
through those years. So that was a part of our school, was working together as a family, and everybody had different gifts and talents and then when we opened the bookstores, they all worked either in the shipping or in the front. And the people worked in the front and talked to customers, and the ones that weren't people did accounting or shipping.
Oh.
And it all worked out beautifully. It was a plan I didn't think of, and I have to look back now and say, wow, look what God was doing when I didn't even realize it. Innately,
Mm.
I knew I wanted my kids to be happy. So innately, I put them in the place I thought they would be. But now, years and years later, after I've read books on management and dealing with employees, I realized I was doing a great job because God was guiding me. The Holy Spirit was guiding me, even sometimes when I wasn't listening real well. So, did that answer your question?
A little bit. Just it seems like you kind of made the rhythm of your homeschooling to be what you were just you just included your children in what you were doing,
Yes.
and that
The
helped.
biggest change I made
Mhm.
that was huge. When we started homeschooling with four children, it just started pouring here, so you can hear a little noise. Um, Four kids with textbooks and a toddler. And you already know having a toddler could be a whole hour easily because, she would walk in and go, talk to me,
Yes.
because she was being frustrated. But with the four kids and six subjects, and I got these little teacher planners. Remember, there was no homeschooling, there was no Pinterest, there was no YouTube, there was nothing to go to. So I was winging it. And I got these teacher books from the teacher bookstore that had little squares and boxes. And then I wrote each kid's name and what page they had to read. And I would stick a sticky note on it and give it to them and say, okay, here's your math, here's your language, here's your this, here, 6 times 4. This was a lot of work. And I was mad, irritated, and frustrated almost daily. When they left the room, we had a schoolhouse with desk and a flag and the whole 9 yards. When they left the schoolroom, I didn't leave. I stayed there for hours writing in these little boxes and then looking to make sure that they did it and
Mm.
making notes for what they didn't do right that I had to go over with them the next day. It was horrible. It was just too much work for one person for four kids.
Yeah.
I switched to unit studies.
Okay.
Wow. Wow. Now, this is when homeschool conferences just started. So I went to a lot of workshops. Valerie Bent was a big unit study person, and I learned from her and some other people. And I started doing all of our Bible, history, and science together. What a difference. And we started using living books. We started reading. They loved it. Even the older ones loved it. They never balked. Even when they were like 18 years old, they didn't balk. They loved being read to. So instead of these school desks and
Mhm.
the flag and all that, and no more little boxes, I started reading aloud. We learned history by reading, reading a book about Paul Bunyan, reading a book about, the Revolutionary War. We didn't just do textbooks anymore.
Mm.
And then when the internet came, when I had my two little guys, we had the internet, so we could go online. And if we were studying, the cocoon of the butterfly, it took us off to all of a sudden we'd do an hour in China and the Silk Roads,
Okay.
and it would go off on something else, something else, something else. So we were learning to learn
Mm.
instead of regurgitating something from a textbook. That was a huge change. I started not only I stopped resenting what I was doing and started enjoying it because I found something. And on that note, there was a math. that was real popular in the 80s. Everybody was using it, and I spent a couple $100 on it, and I hated it. So what I learned there is, when you go to a restaurant, you can have chicken or beef,
Yes.
and one isn't more better than the other. And the same thing with curriculum. If you find something your best friend says, "Oh, this is great," and you hate it, move on. Consider the loss, resell it, something. Don't stay in something you don't like.
Okay. That's
So there's,
That's good advice. Thank you.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
do you think that that's one of the ways that mamas can, we wrestle with so much pressure of just like the shoulds and the should nots,
yeah.
and you talked about how we should get away from the public school mindset of, certain subjects
Right, right.
done in a certain way. How do you personally discern what actually matters most in each season? Then, like, do you just,
Prayer,
yes, that's
prayer, time with God, time alone with. I have a quilt on my bedspread, and the middle of it says, "Be still and know." The things that happen, and I can tell you thousands of times it's happened to me when I stop. Usually I go for a walk, and that's a great thing to do because you're with the trees and the birds and everything, and just say, "Okay, Father, I don't know how to do this. What do I do?" And you know what? Within 2 or 3 days, he starts pouring. I'll give you one real quick. It'll sound silly to some people, but it was big for me. It made me cry. I make a Bible study every month with my Bible study Facebook group, and I had my mother died, so I was flying or driving to Florida, and my schedule was all messed up because we didn't plan on a trip to Florida. And I knew that I was going to have to repeat another study. I wouldn't have time to develop a new study. And I have 36 studies on there, so it was pretty easy to say, okay, I'll pull up one I did in 2018. So I was looking through the list, and I just said a little prayer before I went to bed. I said, Father, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what we're going to do next month. You know what people need. Will you please show me what study we should be in for the month of June, which is where we're at right now? And didn't think anything else about it, went to bed. Every time I go to bed, I pop in I have ADHD really bad. I'm all over the place. You'll find out by listening to me. And I pop in the little earbud
Mhm.
while I go to sleep next to my husband. And when I popped it in, the podcast that I had queued said, "We need wisdom." And I said, "Well, that's it. I'll do the wisdom study." And that's exactly what we did. And what a blessing it was because there's a lot more to it, but it was a real blessing to do that one at that time for me. And now I've heard from some other women how they really needed that at this time. So it's being still, knowing he's God, focusing on that. And it seems simple, but it's a secret and it's profound and it works.
Absolutely. I agree. I think that sometimes we think it's just prayer, like it's
Yeah, yeah. We forget how powerful because you're connecting with the universe. You're saying, "I want to walk in union with you. I want to give up my lustful ways, my fleshly ways. I don't want to be of this world. I want to walk in you." And that's what this life is about. It's lessons of getting out of this flesh and being the spirit he wants us to be, and we're preparing for eternity.
absolutely. That's kind of one of the goals that I have with Cultivate is that we center everything around the Torah and we're not.
Yes,
So I think this is
absolutely.
fantastic.
That's the right direction.
Thank
You
you.
can't go wrong.
But what has helped you to release those expectations and just embrace grace, though? I know you said that it's about praying and walking in the Word and having that rhythm in your
Mhm.
daily life, but how are you able to like really just let it go and just embrace grace with yourself and
You write a book on inner peace.
yes, I was going to ask you about that.
Um, I wrote the book on inner peace because I'm still trying to let go.
Okay.
Um, I was in a very bad marriage when we built the homeschool stores. I built the homeschool stores and he kind of took credit and took them all, and I lost everything after 17 years. And I was full of anger.
Mm.
And what I saw that anger do, I'm answering your question with what not to do.
That's
Because I was ate up with anger. And people tried to tell me that the entire time, and I didn't see it. And when I look back, I can see 40 years. I didn't express it verbally all the time. I just little digs here and there. I would little comments, but inside I was full of anger because it was not right. And I thought because I was wronged, I was justified in my anger. Guess what? My anger, because we can be angry but sin not, I was sinning because I was dwelling on it. I was focused on it, on the injustice, on being wronged. And I never let it go in all those years. I tried. I prayed. I said I let it go. And then I grabbed it back and grabbed it back and grabbed it back. And here's why my children were affected very, very negatively. And so I would see one of them struggling with weight, and I would say, "Oh, if his father didn't put that garbage in his head." I would sit there and ruminate on what was done wrong to them is why this happened, or one of them not being appreciative, or what for whatever it was. Every time I saw a wound in them, I would get mad at their dad all over. And he died. So it was really kind of ridiculous that I was still hanging on to that anger. So I wrote the Inner Peace book, started it years before I wrote it, in notes and studies and lessons to get rid of the anger myself. So the answer is focus on the word. Find a book that's already written. I found about 20 on anger. And I read them and I took notes and I highlighted and I wrote out and I journaled. The Celebrate Recovery was huge for me. That helped me a lot because, I didn't feel bad when I put this together. Moses was 40 years in the palace, 40 years in the desert, and 40 years in the wandering. I was angry for 40 years and God had to expose it and then help me let go of it. And my path is different than other people's paths. And because I'm spiritually mature in ABC means I might be spiritually immature in DEF, and somebody else could be spiritually mature in ABC. And you can see where I'm going. We all have different paths and different ways that God's healing us in different timelines. Stuff that I was working on didn't get healed for a while, and other people are healed instantly. So you just have to continually go back to surrendering, again back to Judges, the cycle of instruction with Judges. They tried to do it on their own, they failed. They turned to God, repented, and got a better way. I did it over and over. We all do it over and over if you think about it.
That's true. Is there like a particular date or theme from the Discovering Inner Peace that you think that mamas should really sit with and revisit?
Well, I did it on anger and bitterness was my desire, but it's also about renewing your mind. The whole thing's about renewing your mind and constantly going back to the word and then looking at the Bible stories. What happened to Ruth? What happened to Joshua? What happened to Joseph? What did Caleb do? And when you keep going back to the word, that's when and there's questions in each one, and that helps a lot. If you really stop, and I didn't say this in the book and I didn't leave any lines in the book, but if you stop and jot down your answers, it's huge.
Okay.
Journaling has probably been my biggest help besides prayer and Bible study has been writing it out.
That's a good outlet just to
Yeah.
invite more peace in. That's
Hmm.
fantastic. Looking back over your homeschool journey, what do you think really mattered in the end and what didn't?
There was a lot of things that didn't that I focused on. The biggest thing that I can remember is we were having a dinner and some friends were over, but kind of worldly people. And my Marine son had just had a baby, and this man at the table was telling him some things that I really have to be careful because I don't want to say too much, but he was saying things that I didn't agree with, and I felt were almost unethical and was not the choice I would make raising children. And then later, I pulled my son aside in the kitchen because I was so angry that this guy had said this stuff. And I said, "You don't believe any of that, do you?" He said, "Mom, you raised me. I know better than that." And that was it. It was just like, oh, he was listening. He was listening. And there's a lot of those little things. My daughter, 10 years ago, my daughter passed away. She was 36 and she left three little boys. And she came to me, sorry, one time and said, I can't even remember what it was about, but she said, "Oh, you read us about that. That's all, that goes back to that book in The Elephant Man. Remember, he was judged by his looks and not his insides." And I was like, "You remember that?" And so they do. It's when I see fruit,
Hmm.
I see fruit. I see good fruit and bad fruit. Sorry to say, I see some bad things I put in it too. And that's hard when it's a mirror of your own child going, you know, you should have let it go and you didn't. And now look what the result is. Remember, more is caught than taught.
Absolutely. Oh
Mhm.
goodness. Well, were there moments between you and the father where, you just that helped to rebuild the trust and just heal your heart from those things that maybe you planted in your children that maybe you shouldn't, or just any gentle stories you'd feel comfortable sharing?
There's two stories that I can't tell you.
Okay.
In the book, I can write them. I would be blubbering by the time I told you, and that would be my 36-year-old daughter's death. And then, shoot, my 25-year-old son lost his leg last year. I can't, God worked through it. It's a beautiful thing now, but it's still raw. It's still painful. So, in summary, with all the children, I can just tell you, well, let me give you this. My 23-year-old son, my youngest son, is a police officer. He's gigantic. And he took, when he was 16 years old, he started doing jujitsu. I always have trouble with that word. And he just loved it. He just took off on it. And he was like 3 or 4 years. He never had a desire to become a police officer. I was a police officer when I was raising 4 kids alone.
Mhm.
But he always felt like police officers were just those guys that were going to get you when you were speeding. So he didn't have that desire at all to do anything like that. And he's a wonderful guy. He's messianic, Torah keeping, never has touched pork, etc. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, he joins the police academy. So I went to him. I said, "What happened?" And what the jujitsu is perfect because he has been able to take down guys left and right with almost no trouble at all because he knows all the moves. So God was preparing him just like he was preparing Moses,
Mhm.
just like he's preparing all of us. There were things in my life when I was young, when I was a police officer, that he was preparing me. I wrote reports and I wrote really good reports and I spent a lot of time on them. And now I write books. So God uses everything.
Mhm.
Well, I went to him, I said, why did you become a police officer? This is out of the blue. And he said, well, he has a firearm and he wanted to be able to carry it. You don't need a license now, but back then you did. He said, I wanted to carry, so I took this class on concealed carry, and the man who taught it was a Christian.
Mhm.
And he asked me if I wanted to go on a ride along. And he said, I always had it in my head police officers were just out there to give tickets and be mean. And I saw this guy go up to people and be kind and caring and gentle and pray with them and take them, give them a meal. And he said, I saw him act like a Christian and a police officer. So he became a police officer. And I hope he stays with the, it's hard when you are a police officer to not get hardened.
Mhm.
And he's asked me to pray for him for that a couple of times because he's having a little trouble. But it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing when you can go out in the world and show the love and truth that you know God presents, and in a world of lies, in a world of deception, because it's bad. It's bad out there. Y'all know that.
Yes. One word of blessing or encouragement that you'd like to speak over the mamas listening today?
Oh, God bless you all. And don't forget the Old Testament when you're learning. It's critical. And everything's a season. A Proverbs 31 woman is not perfect, and she does certain things in certain seasons. I tell this to my daughter-in-law all the time with a 3-year-old and a nursing baby. You can't do it all right now. Your focus has got to be on them. They're the priority. As much as the world makes you be the priority, the children are the priority in a balanced way. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. That's my one thing.
Thank you. you. That's so wonderful, Robin. Just thank you so much for sharing your heart today and just the way you walk with just both tenderness and truth. I think that's so
Thank you.
encouraging to so many of us already. And I know today's conversation will definitely plant seeds of hope and peace
I
in
hope so. I
you.
hope so.
So thank you so much. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you for just joining us.
Thank you for having me. I am honored. Honored. Thank you.